Fight briefing. Where's my mouse? Fight briefing. Found my mouse. New York is getting rid of plastic bags starting March 1st. Good thing we're leaving. Welcome everybody to another episode of Fight Briefing, episode 18, I believe, or is it 19? I think it's 19. We are on episode 19 of a Fight Briefing. How is everybody doing tonight? I've got my St. Patrick's Day stuff going on because St. Patrick's Day is right around the corner. I love you too, Real Gamer. My day's going great, actually, Two Joints. Thank you for asking. Our travel to the move is getting closer and closer by the minute. So it's very, very exciting. Things are happening. Things are being put in place. You know, so yeah, so if you guys... Oh, fuck, I don't have it. No. Ba-boom. There it is. Right over there, guys. If you would like to help the Holes move, we are just shy of where we need to be to continue making this happen. There's a link to Streamlabs in the description below. Also, Patreon if you'd like to join up and help us in a monthly way, or Super Chat as well. You guys have been extremely helpful as of late, and we only can go up from here. Now, I hope everyone is doing well today because we are headed in to Ufc Auckland, or UFC Fight Night 168, Felder versus Hooker, or UFC on ESPN Plus 26, I think it is. Anyways, it takes place in New Zealand. So it's actually seeing New Zealand for the first time since June 2017. And while nobody is really going to make to mistake New Zealand, UFC Fight Night 168 for like a super high-end card, it is pretty intriguing in terms of some of the fights that are on the card, especially the main event. And on the main card itself, in the form of Sosoli and Tukhugov and Mustafaev and all those great names there. That being said, I'm going to give you guys my predicted outcomes for UFC Fight Night 168, Auckland, New Zealand. And I'm going to give you those picks for the main card. I'm going to get your guys' picks for the main card. And then we're going to all live happily ever after. How's that sound? Wonderful, wonderful?
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right, so let me start by showing you who is on the card for the evening, for Saturday night. Kevin Aguilar versus Zubaira Tukhugov is kicking off the main card on Saturday night, followed by, is it Riddell? Brad Riddell or Brad Riddle? Someone please correct me. Magomed versus Mustafaev? Magomed Mustafaev, I believe is how you pronounce it. And then we've got Sosoli versus Marcos Rogelio de Lima, which I find fascinating for quite a few reasons, and I'll get into that when we get to that fight. Karolina Kowalkiewicz is back once again to fight Xiaonan, which is very interesting to me because Karolina Kowalkiewicz has been on a 3-fight losing streak, which a lot of people think that maybe she's fallen out of her prime a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to talk about that one. And then we've got Jim Crute versus Michael Oleksiejczuk or Mikhail. Paul Felder versus Dan Hooker is your main event for the evening. So let me just scroll down here to the first fight of the main card, and we'll get started talking about it. How are you guys doing tonight? Is everybody wonderful? Let me know in the chat real quick while I get this scroll real quick. Whoa, what happened? Whoa, did you see that? My transformation just glitched on me. I hope it didn't glitch for you guys. Oh, it did glitch for you guys. Oh, shit. No, that sucks. Two Joints says, Olawanda. Wonderful says, Manny C. Kaikar France. Wonderful. Thanks to Scott McClee. Well, I'm glad you're wonderful. Shannon Stewart says, wonderful. Jan tested negative for coronavirus, but positive for THC, bro. Glitchy, wonderful. Black Hole. Can you talk about Wilson Reyes, my friend, signing with the promotion Aries FC? Also, JBH, why are you telling us who's on the card when we already know who's on it and can just look it up on the UFC page? Good. Well, let me tell you a little gift, Justin Jr., if you want to get into this thing. Usually what you do is go through who's on the card before you give your picks for who's on the card. That's like a rule of thumb. So Why don't you stop asking me so many questions, Justin, and just sit there and learn? All right, let's get into it. Kevin Aguilar versus Zubaira Tukhugov is the first fight of the main card. Now, we do have a training partner of Khabib Nurmagomedov, my favorite guy, in Tukhugov, and he's been in the UFC for quite a while now. He debuted back in 2014, which makes it pretty amazing if you ask me. He's only had 5 fights in the octagon thus far. Of course, that's big because of his run has been a little bit controversial. But there is a lot to talk about with this fight. And let's start with Aguilar, right? I think the real question existing with this fight is, can Aguilar...
You back up or you're going to go to sleep. Man, you need to back up or you can go to sleep too.
Barney!
Okay, so hi, I'm a comedian. You listen to me, Kay? Good. So there is this magical room where only I can go in, and no, not Perry the platypus. Okay, I went in this room and I found out I was Wonder Woman, but I'm actually a man, so I'm just sitting there.
So you stopped mid-sentence, my friend. I don't know where you were going with that. Maybe he's going to continue his sentence. I don't know. Thank you, Barney, for the donation. I appreciate it. What I was going to say is the real question here, can Aguilar take quite a bit of damage throughout the beginning of the fight and then come back in the later rounds to outwork Tukhugov? Now, Aguilar graduated from the Contender Series back in 2018, which was actually a season that we ended up reacting to. And I do believe Aguilar does have the ability to take some serious damage here. I know I kind of presented the question when we first got into this of can he, but I'm not really worried about that too much. What I am a little worried about with Aguilar is that although he's a relatively heavy hitter, he's really not the type of striker who's got the ability to KO at UFC level, I guess you could say. Now, Tukhugov is extremely well-rounded, his opponent. And let me just start by saying that he's a true Dagestani fighter, so I'm sure I could be a little biased in picking this fight. I've been guilty of it before. You all know I love me some Dagestani. Ew. Yes, oh, it didn't work out how I wanted it to. Anyways, Tukhugov is pretty strong and pretty agile on the feet. And he does have a type of knockout power that Aguilar probably can't compete with, which is also extremely promising for him in this fight. Another thing that's pretty typical of a Dagestani fighter, as we all know, is his wrestling capability. Now, he doesn't really wrestle the same way Khabib does. If anything, he's more of a striker. He's more of the guy on the feet. But regardless, if we're speaking in terms of perhaps where he struggles a little bit, I would venture to say it's probably his cardio. I wouldn't worry about his striking. I wouldn't worry about his wrestling or anything like that. In UFC 242, we did see him run out of steam against Lerone Murphy, which it's a little scary to think about against someone who does have a little bit more of a gas tank. So I think bottom line for this fight, guys, I feel honestly like this was a little bit of a tougher fight to pick because obviously I do like to lean toward the Dagestani fighters. I do think that the way they're trained and the level of skill that they present is just something worth picking. And I did find it tough simply because I wanted to make this as unbiased as possible. I would argue that Aguilar is the better finisher than Tukhugov, and Aguilar does only have 2 losses on his record, which looks really good for him, especially in the UFC. I do, however, think that Tukhugov does have the skills to outwork Aguilar on the feet if he can maintain a better cardio this time around than in his fight in UFC 242. And on the ground, he's most certainly more dangerous, so there's really no question about that. So I think overall, as a well-rounded fighter, as long as he can pay attention to that cardio, I would still end up going Tukhugov by decision. Not a biased pick, I promise. Why does it keep doing this? Look at this. It glitches every time I try to head over to the chat and see who you guys have. All right, let me know who you have. Kevin Aguilar or Zubaira Tukhugov. MMA-Holes says, Flat Earth Deacon, Jess, do you shave your coochie? That is a horrible question to ask James Ortega, and I will not tell you the answer to it because it's only for Moss to know. How dare you disrespect the Queen, JBH, like that? Colby Beats Both says King K. Kevin says DDS Aquatics. Hewitt Liar says Dagestan, best leg humpers ever. Polar Bear says, you Brazilian wax. I got Zubib, says Jonas G. Flat thinking with the horns. JBH, Alpha Predator. Dino Nuggets for dinner. Heavy Microgrow. She waxes bro. She's not an animal. Real gamer Dagestani. Lisa Duff says, Lion King 909 coming to Docs. Kainoto 74 says, Jess, you could have just said yes. How dare he ask me? Right, Kainoto? How dare he ask me? Why would I just say yes? Why would I give him that level of satisfaction?
No!
All right.
No! Yes, sir!
All right. I'm going to move on to the next fight here. The next fight. Brad Riddell. Did someone correct me, by the way? Is it Riddell or Riddle? I'm going to say Riddell, unless someone corrects me. We have Brad Riddell versus Magomed Mustafaev. Now, Brad Riddell is from New Zealand. He does have a little bit of a home field advantage here. He trains out of the same camp as Israel Adesanya and Dan Hooker, who is the main event of the evening. And he did make his UFC debut back in October, and that tells me that there's not much UFC experience to really make that much of a determination off of, I suppose you could say. I'm just going to quote an article that I read here, or semi-quoted. I don't know like the words verbatim, but I'm going to quote an article that I read when I was researching this fight. And they basically said Riddell looked good in his fight against Malarkey. He was showing skills on the feet and on the ground to suggest that he's a solid athlete who could probably have some success at the lower end of the UFC. But to put him in with Mustafaev in his second fight is complete madness. And I couldn't agree more. Mustafaev is another Dagestani! All right.
Wonderful.
He's another Dagestani, so of course there's another biased opinion here. But I made sure to approach this with the most unbiased outlook on the fight. Now, again, like I said, I must remain unbiased, but Mustafaev has been in the UFC much longer. In fact, for quite a bit, since 2015, if I had to be exact. Now, he only has one loss on his UFC record, which came by the hands of Kevin Lee, who arguably was just better at the time. Steve.
You're doing a great job. Love your show.
Love you, Steve. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Now, Mustafaev, like I said, he only has one loss. But before that Kevin Lee loss, he was seeing some relatively great success early on in his career. And immediately following that fight, he was also seeing that same type of success. Now, Mustafaev is extremely well-rounded. His wrestling is completely ridiculous. He's got great foot agility, nasty kicks. His striking is more than up to par. So I would say bottom line for this fight, guys, I hate to write off any fighter in the UFC, particularly one who's fighting at home, because I always like to give that home field advantage to fighters. But I just don't see how Riddell could win this fight. He is clearly slower than Mustafaev. Well, a little bit slower, I guess you could argue. And quite honestly, I do worry that he's just simply no competition really in any area, whether it's on the feet or on the ground or anything like that. So I would honestly see a stoppage before a decision here, simply because this fight does seem to be made to push Mustafaev up on the ladder a little bit. It seems like a little bit of a layup that the UFC decided to try and put together. So I would go with Mustafaev by KO TKO in the second round. Let me know who you guys have in the chat. Glitch. Come on. What is with this glitch? It's the worst. Like, it's the absolute worst thing ever. It's so unflattering for you guys just to see this black hole of a screen when it's glitching over to the freaking chat. Who does that? Come on. Brett Kummel says, oh, what was that? Where's my boy Moss? Mystic Moss, Brett Kummel. This must be, Brett. Sorry, not Brett. Well, Brett Kummel. Anyways, this must be the first time he's tuned into Fight Briefing. Thursday nights is JBH night, guys. I apologize if you missed Mystic Moss. If you'd like me to replace myself with him, I will happily do that. to give you guys your Mystic Moss show.
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right. I'll go with Daggy Boy, says Polar Bear. And I got the same. Do it for me. I got the Dagestan. Don't forget Bomb Squad. Fook, that says Real Gamer. Sad Music. This is the JBH show. The best. I'm not chatting on no more. Only call. Can't get my damn opinion out. Well, Justin, listen. I hate to break it to you, buddy. But if you're chatting, we're not going to read every comment that says Justin Jr. Everybody here has an equal chance, and there's a lot of comments, so we might miss your comment. It's okay. Just put in your comment. If it doesn't get read, it doesn't get read. Nah, stop being... All right.
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right, so the next fight, Ben Sosoli versus Marcos Rogelio de Lima. Now, I actually kind of like this fight for a couple of reasons. Sosoli is simply unproven at this level, if you ask me. Now, he was signed by the UFC this past year. He was a part of the Contender Series, but his Contender Series debut was a no contest. And to be quite honest, he never really got off to a great start when it came to the UFC anyways, because it started with the no contest in his debut, and then his debut in the UFC, in the actual octagon, ended with him losing because Greg Hardy completely pummeled him out in the third round of their fight. Now, I would argue Sosoli was winning the first two rounds, but here's where it gets weird. Now, you could argue Greg Hardy was cheating in that fight. I know a lot of people have tried to argue that he was cheating in that fight, and then a lot of other people were trying to kind of come to Greg Hardy's defense. So ultimately, it's whatever your opinion is on what happened there. The whole inhaler gate thing, there's a lot going around that does indeed prove that your performance can be enhanced to a certain extent, as an inhaler does have an active ingredient called volanterol, and that is not allowed according to USADA. It supposedly dilates your bronchial passages, so it allows you to breathe better because it's used to help people who have asthma. And that particular ingredient is considered a beta-2 agonist, which is illegal, according to USADA. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, just get off track for like a couple seconds. A beta-2 agonist actually can increase muscle mass. It can reduce body fat. It can cause short-term performance enhancement by increasing your plasma volume levels. And of course, anything that affects the body's performance like that will be banned by USADA immediately. So all that being said, of course, it's easy to say Sosoli did have the potential to win or lose a lopsided decision, because you could argue he was winning the first two rounds in that fight had Hardy not cheated, right? Now, Sosoli does have plenty of KOs on his record, but they were all against questionable opposition. And worryingly, he has had a couple of losses by decision as well. De Lima, on the other hand, his opponent. Now, that tells you, that gives you a little backstory of where Sosoli stands now. So it's difficult based on Sosoli's last fight to really make that assumption. But let's go to his opponent for now, which is De Lima. De Lima has plenty of experience at a UFC level, and essentially he is an extremely heavy-handed classic Muay Thai striker with a penchant for takedowns and some thudding ground and pound, if you ask me, with some rudimentary submissions. But he's also a very poor defensive grappler, hence 4 losses by submission. Thankfully for him here, though, it does appear unlikely that Sosoli will ever really shoot for any takedown. So for me to question, or to me, the question would ultimately be whether or not De Lima can avoid being hurt by Sosoli early on in the fight, which arguably I really think he could. Now, I would venture to say it's not impossible for De Lima to KO Sosoli, but given that Sosoli does look to come from this school with Mark Hunt. And Mark Hunt has that hard-headed mentality. I think Sosoli's probably going to come with the same mentality, so I really doubt it. Bottom line for this fight, I think for me, this fight should easily lean into the direction of De Lima. I could say as long as his cardio stays intact and he kind of plays the game of the range, he's really got advantages in this fight, just about everywhere in the fight. However, I do feel that Sosoli is a quick learner, especially given his past fights. So I'm going to have to go with the idea that Sosoli can catch Lima pretty clean on the chin. And with that being said, I would have to go with Sosoli by KO TKO in the 3rd round. Let me up. All right, let me know who you guys have in the chat. Why does it keep doing this?
No!
All right. De Lima will ragdoll, says Rustbot Apocalypse. No, DBH, no. Laughing my ass off, says Brett Kummel. How do you pronounce your name, my friend? Kummel. All right. So Sosoli by decision. Sosoli. I have dilemma. Jesse Bill, what's your opinion on Wilson Reyes? Him signing to Aries FC. I told him about you guys. You can interview him. Well, ask again tomorrow during Fukoff Friday, and we will talk about it, Justin, because this is fight briefing, and we're only going over one card of fights, my friend. Hayes, guys, it's Hayes. It's Wilson Hayes. Get it right, motherfuckers. I don't know what you heard, but it's Hayes. It's Hayes over here. All right. That's awkward. All right, let me move on to the next fight. Here we go. This is the one that fascinates me, and I'll tell you why. Karolina I'm stumbling over my words tonight, guys. I do it every fucking Thursday. It must be like a normal thing now. I just always stumble over my words. Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Xiaonan. It doesn't seem all that long ago that Kowalkiewicz, at the point undefeated, was facing off against Oleksiejczuk, who was a fellow Polish striker of hers. And that was for the UFC strawweight title. Let me just start by saying, I know a lot of people are under this impression that Karolina's best days may be behind her, but given her 3-fight losing streak, I can understand why you would think so. I don't. I was on that train. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think so for a little bit, that maybe her best days were behind her. But I'm trying to keep in mind that she does have a pretty decent fighting game for how long she has been fighting, as well as who her former opponents have been when she did lose. She is a decent striker. She's a decent grappler. She's pretty strong in the clinch. And to be quite honest, it's been the fact that she isn't necessarily world class in any area that kind of cost her all of those losses, which have all come against notably better athletes. As far as weaknesses are concerned, I would honestly say that she doesn't necessarily have as heavy of a striking style, or a striking power, not a style, but a power behind her striking than some of her fellow athletes in the division, which could explain why she did lose that title shot and everything. We've also seen that she does have a weakness for being taken down as well as being submitted. So there are clear weaknesses in her game, but we already know what those are, and she knows what those are. But like I said, look at who her opponents were when she was losing. They were top tier. These were opponents that were not to be messed with and were certainly above competition for Karolina Kowalkiewicz. If her opponents are of equal competition, however, she does do a pretty decent job at outworking them to a decision, which is where that long streak of wins came from on her record before she went on to a 2-fight losing streak, and then she won twice, and then she went on to a 3-fight losing streak. This fight is actually extremely interesting to me for that reason alone. The fact that she was fighting top-tier fighters when she was losing tells me that she might have an actual opportunity here, because from what we've seen of Jan, from what we've seen as far as what she's shown, she's got a very similar skill set to her opponent. She seems to be a relatively decent striker. She's agile on the feet, and her takedowns seem to be pretty brutal. And what I like about her is, like Karolina, she doesn't seem to have as much power behind those strikes. And she's also not very technical with her striking. So that gives Karolina a little bit of an advantage here. I also know some people aren't a big fan of MMA math, but if we were to look at past fights for both opponents, Xiaonan lost to Grasso, and Karolina Kowalkiewicz gave her a run for her money in that fight. So I think bottom line for this fight, I feel really strongly that Karolina might have the upper hand in this fight. I do feel that she needs this win more than anything, coming off of a 3-fight losing streak. She needs to prove why she still belongs in the UFC and break that streak. I also think Xiaonan might, still have a bit more to prove when it comes to overall fighting skills. So I would honestly go Kowalkiewicz by decision. Let me know who you guys have in the chat. Good!
Wonderful, wonderful.
Hey guys, is Drunk Savage on vacation? Nah, he's taking a bit time off, my friend. But thanks for asking. He's doing all right. Sup, Gollum? How much is a ticket? I live in NZ2. How much is a ticket? I have no idea. That's a good question. I have no idea. I would not be able to answer that for you. Maybe someone in the chat can help you out. Let's see. The MMA-Holes is coming to Portland, Oregon. We might get tickets. Oh, the UFC is coming to Portland, Oregon. It's a fight night. Mystic Moss is laughing in the chat. Moss, get back to work, says Justin Dempsey. Karolina is a survivor. Them Ruskies die hard. Brett Kummel is dropping up plates and it says Moss equals plates with a fist palm. I don't know what that means. Jesse, how old are you? I'm 23, my friend. Where is your brother, Moss? Oh, my brother? Yeah, he's in the other room. He's I just fed him beef stew earlier, so he's nice and happy and full. He's chilling on a full belly. All right. Let's get to the next fight of the main card for Saturday night. We have Jimmy Crute versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Now, judging on what we've seen from previously from both of these light heavyweights, the likelihood of this going the distance seems to be somewhere between slim to none, to be quite honest. We're going to see some kind of finish. I don't know what kind of finish, but we're going to see some kind of finish. Crute has yet to see the end of the third round in his UFC career. He's always had finishes in his fights. And while Oleksiejczuk's last 3 fights have ended before the end of the second round, that's something that we should also keep into account as well. Now, for me, this fight ultimately depends on what Crute wants to execute here. Crute has some promising KO power behind him, but he would ultimately have to kind of keep an eye out for those sharp counter punches from Oleksiejczuk that he's a huge fan of if he wants to play within range. Crute also appears to be relatively strong on the ground, which is honestly going to bode well for him against someone like Oleksiejczuk, who I don't feel shows as much promise against a stronger grappler. But like I said, about the striking, it's very worrisome to me, given that he'd be trading blows with that, what do they call it? The Polish power. He'd be trading blows with Polish power. Now, as far as Oleksiejczuk is concerned, I would say we are a bit more familiar with Oleksiejczuk's skill overall. He's a phenomenal striker. He's got super heavy hands. He likes to work the body. He likes to pick his opponents apart. In fact, we actually got to see that when he fought Gian Villante. That's exactly what he did. He worked the body and picked him apart. We also know that his game in the clinch is pretty well off. He's got a decent chin, so he can take quite a bit of damage from his opponents without going down. Now, as I previously mentioned, I do fear for his ability on the ground as well. His ability on the ground. A well-grounded opponent like Crute is someone who who'd probably give him a run for his money. He has been submitted in the past, Oleksiejczuk, and it certainly is no comparison to his abilities on the feet, so that's something he is definitely going to have to watch out for. I'll be honest here, for the bottom line, as much as I'm concerned for Oleksiejczuk's well-being in certain areas, I was incredibly impressed with some of his past performances, most notably against OSP. I know he lost that fight, but from what I saw, as far as skill level in the clinch and when he plays at the range of the feet, he can definitely be pretty dangerous. So I would say, given Crute is arguably better than Oleksiejczuk, I would still say he isn't a renowned wrestler and can be sloppy himself on the ground. And in all honesty, I'm just concerned that he doesn't have enough to deal with Oleksiejczuk in imperative areas. So my pick is going to be Oleksiejczuk by KO TKO in the second round. Let me know who you guys have.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I'm going to start playing music every time we wait for the chat to pop up over there. All right. Chris Loring, hello, and I had a great birthday. Alpha Predator Gandhi was a racist pedophile.
No!
That's not true. How dare you? How dare you say something like that? Howdy Flat, hanging with the boys.
Hanging with the boys.
The fights are tonight. The fights are tonight. No, they're not. They're not tonight. They're tomorrow night. 4 p.m. Eastern time, guys. Make sure you no, not tomorrow night. Saturday night. 4 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you guys tune in because it's an earlier card. It's in New Zealand. Who are these people? Who you got in the main flat? Fucked up the first one. Happy birthday, Ann. Justin Jr., not like us grown-ups is what I meant. Cannot wait for a fight briefing when Oleksiej Olenek fights. Bill, if you go with Verdum, I'm going to have Mark come over your house. Jesse Sexy Mama Hill, you never answer my question. Who wins, Triple C or Francis Ngannou? I never answered it because it's such a ridiculous question. But I would have to go with Triple C.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys, the last fight. Oh, I'm not. Sorry, no. Yeah, fuck. The last fight of the night, guys. Paul Felder versus Dan Hooker.
Wonderful,
All right, guys,
wonderful.
calm down. Okay. Who's excited? Drop the ones in the chat right now if you're excited for the main event of UFC Fight Night 168, UFC Auckland. I'm kind of excited. I have to be perfectly honest. I find it fascinating. I find that the UFC's lightweight division is a super tricky one to read at the moment. The fact that the division's champion is also one of the promotion's biggest drawing cards right now means that making fights for him is a lot trickier than it is to make fights for, say, the welterweight champs for Kamaru Usman. And that means that a handful of fighters at the top of the division, like Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor, are much more protective of their spots than their equivalents elsewhere. So I find it fascinating to me to just kind of see who wants to kind of push themselves up to fight Khabib. But quite honestly, it's not going to be one of these two anytime soon. But it is fascinating nonetheless. Now, I'm going to start by stating that Felder is a fantastic fighter, an outstanding striker in particular. But please, if you are going to go Dan Hooker, it's fine. But don't sleep on Felder at any rate in this fight. He is 5-0 in his last 5 fights at 155. And most recently, he edged out Edson Barboza in an ultra-close fight to call avenging an earlier loss from 2015. So with their rematch, and even Edson Barboza was going to try and come in and appeal that. And I'm like, what the fuck? Felder clearly won that fight. Now, some things Felder is definitely going to have to look out for in this fight, and there will be things, is the length and the range of Hooker. Now, he's only 1 inch shorter than Hooker, and he's only got a 1.5 inch reach disadvantage than Hooker. But as little as that might be, it could be a devastating factor here for Felder. And the reason being, Hooker is extremely accustomed to using his jabs, to getting in that range, using jabs, using knee strikes, using kicks. And we've seen how Felder's legs have kind of swelled up and become extremely damaged and impairing by fighters who have used a lot of kicks in the past. So with that in mind, that type of offense by Hooker might make it extremely difficult for Felder to really get in that range and do very much work. Now, that's not to say that Felder is not a tough fighter. In fact, I would actually argue that he's one of the toughest in his division. He fought multiple rounds with a broken rib. In fact, I think that was his last fight. He fought multiple rounds with a broken rib, and he had the inability to breathe for God's sake. Like, it's clear that Felder is an extremely tough fighter here. I do believe Felder is the type to take it to the distance. His cardio is there. We know that. He's extremely versatile. He's tough as nails. So I would honestly venture to say that Felder has the incredible chance here. Hooker, on the other hand, I feel we could argue that Hooker picked up the bigger wins in 2019. He defeated James Vick. He defeated Ali Quinta, both of whom had main evented UFC shows in recent times. And I just got super, like the ADD moment. I just got super distracted, and I realized that I'm not even in the middle of the frame. Sorry, guys. I got super distracted there. Speaking of Hooker, right? Let's go back to talking about Hooker. Hooker has had sort of a tremendous opportunity and ample time to really develop his game over the years since he joined the UFC. He has since transformed from his lanky submission game into a dangerous kickboxer, which we know he's going to be using against Felder. And he's learned how to make the most of that 6-foot frame and that reach that he has. Now, we saw Hooker take some serious damage in a couple of his past fights, most notably Edson Barboza, who we had just mentioned. But with that said, it's worth noting that Hooker kept moving forward for 3 rounds, guys, before the referee ever stopped that fight. And that tells you the level of toughness that Felder has against him right now. And if you ask me, that's pretty fucking incredible to keep moving forward after taking severe damage for 3 rounds. I also believe having a home field advantage does have a lot to do with how a fighter performs. There is a sense of adrenaline there, as well as some sort of self-worth in proving themselves in front of their friends and their family. The crowd celebration alone is worth fighting even harder for. So I would say bottom line for the main event of Saturday night, guys, with all of this in mind, I'm going to throw you for a loop here. I feel Felder might actually have the slight advantage in this fight. He's a training partner with Cowboy Cerrone, so that gives you the first shoe-in as to how Hooker might be approaching this fight. Another thing to keep in mind is that all of Hooker's victims in the past have come with sort of a warning or a proviso of specific stipulations, I guess you could say. So in other words, Iaquinta, he's primarily a boxer. He simply didn't have the tools to deal with Hooker's kicking game. James Vick has a severely decomposed chin. It's extremely compromised. Gilbert Burns, who he fought, was much shorter, and so on and so forth. There were many more opponents that had that caveat that you could say, and I don't think that he's really going to find that here with Felder. I believe that Felder will be the first fully rounded, dangerous striker that Hooker has had since Edson Barboza, and we all know how the Edson Barboza fight turned out. So I'm going to go with Felder by decision. Let me know who you guys have in the chat.
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right, I got Felder. It says Shannon Stewart, Flat Earthican Fap Hooker. Roberto Solo says anything would help me. America shits on its vets. Ryan Reedy, Fuka, you at Nightbot. Joseph Edrick. Another sad fight card. I think I speak for everyone when I say that the only good cards are pay-per-views. Wrong, I got Hooker. That's Hooker. Moss under the desk. I don't know what these emojis mean, though. Jess, I like how you listen to the mystical one. Listen, I might argue with you a lot, mystical one, but I do respect your talent for making picks. All right, guys. Don't forget to join Goat Milk, our Pick'em League. If you guys want to challenge each other and us on our picks for this weekend, make sure you head over to Tapology. You can go link in the description to the MMA-Holes.com, click the Pick'em page, and then boom, you are over in our Pick'em League. It's called Goat Milk, the MMA Holes. Make sure you guys add yourselves. Once we see a request, we will accept you immediately. We've got 175 people already in Goat Milk, and I'm pretty excited to see where I land. Hopefully I stay on the first page this time around. With that being said, guys, I want to thank all of my sources: What Culture, Sportskeeda, Betting Shark, Forbes, BetDSI, and Tapology. Thank you so much for helping me with the research for these fights. And guys, make sure you let me know in the comment section below what your picks are for the main card and maybe even the pay-per-view, or not the pay-per-view, the preliminaries. And yeah, anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you for joining me tonight for episode 19 of Fight Briefing. We will be live tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for Fuck-Off Friday, and I will see you all again there. I bid you all a fond farewell, and don't be an a-hole, be an MMA-hole.